Hello and welcome to the Madecast, the official podcast of the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, a series of lectures on video game history as part of the Made's ongoing effort to preserve history through teaching and displaying playable exhibits for rare games and consoles.
While life in the time of COVID has forced us to close our doors, the support of people like you has allowed us to continue to bring history to you through lectures and interviews like the ones you'll hear in a few minutes. I'm Red.
I'm Miles.
I'm Chin.
And I'm Anthony. This week, we are covering a bit of history about one of the most standout arcade games of 1983, Dragon's Lair.
Dragon's Lair. This is going to be a fun one. It's a really interesting game if you haven't checked it out. There's many ports playable on like new gen consoles as well, but the arcade standout was definitely one of the biggest standout of the time. I mean, there was games like Pac-Man and Pole Position and Track and Field were like the standout games. Spy Hunter was one of the big games of that year, but they were all 8-bit and none of them were quite as standout as the Laserdisc format of Dragon's Lair. But we'll get more into that in a little bit. But first, here's some news.
So, with your weekly update on Elden Ring progress, the unrestricted speedrun is now under 7 minutes. What I mean by that is that the unrestricted category allows for the zip glitch, which was found recently in Elden Ring, which basically through a combination of lining up animation loops and some issue with transitioning between animations and stepping forward during that, you can, in a 13 frame window, teleport vast distances just by blocking and walking forward.
It's so crazy. If you have no idea of even if you play the game, you probably will have no idea how it's working. It just looks like someone is doing some random stuff, keep staring at the same direction, and then you just pop in another place and the boss is dead. It just...
It really does look like magic.
Yeah. It doesn't look like he's not playing it almost looks like he's cheating. I mean...
Well, Elden Ring is quite a magical world, so I think it lends itself pretty nicely. But it's also such a huge map. I mean, I'm still surprised that it's 7 minutes of how fast you can traverse the entire thing.
Turns out you don't actually need to do that much to get to the end screen.
Apparently not. Just get good. You know, that's the whole theme of the Dark Souls. The Soulsborne genre, just get good. G-D, good. Well, if you want to take a look at it, you can go check it out yourself. I'm sure I'm sure you can check it out on YouTube, other video streaming services. But we also have a new delay for The Witcher 3's next gen version. Did they have an idea of when they delayed it to, or is it just an indefinite delay?
It is indefinitely delayed.
Yeah.
Oh.
They just have decided to have their own in-house development team to conduct the remaining work of moving The Witcher 3 to the next generation console like PS5 and Xbox. And it seems like they probably are not too happy with the previous working team. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying because...
Given these circumstances, and definitely delaying it and then taking control. So
yeah.
I mean, at least they didn't go kind of like the Rockstar route when they released the mobile versions of all of the other ones and just accept low poly slap-ons of people's faces. So maybe it'll be good. I have faith in them just because I feel like they're definitely trying to save some face after the Cyberpunk launch.
What are you saying? Cyberpunk is good.
Now, yes, amazing.
It's good.
It is. It's really good now.
It'll be better in 4 years when I play it.
Yes. Yes. It's a living world. It's very great. I mean, it's very awesome. Well, I'm holding out hope for them. I mean, I think they've felt the gravity of messing up with the launch. So I think they've taken it in stride. Well, we'll see. In other news, Pokemon Go developer Niantic has a new game called Peridot.
It's more like a game that I don't know whether you have played some like Nintendo Dogs or other stuff when it's on DS. So you're able to have your pet dogs in Nintendo DS. I think they're just doing this game like Paradox for like AR version of it. It seems like they're putting more interaction between the players and the pets inside that. But it's a little. Meanwhile, it's Niantic. They're always doing stuff like Pokemon Go.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. I mean, I played a lot of Nintendogs when I was younger. I created my little puppy that ran away in there, and I named him the same name.
Oh,
and it was cute until he just kept doing the same tricks, and he was trapped in my DS for a very long time. So, still very good. In other new news, we have the trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4, which was released. Brings Sora into like a cityscape, like real world, modern cityscape with cars. A giant Heartless appears inside there, and there's another mysterious new girl who's trying to send Sora back to their home world. It's gonna be interesting. I mean, I don't know if I'll pick it up right away.
I don't actually play Kingdom Hearts, but looking at that trailer gives me some flashbacks of some like early trailer for some games, which is called Final Fantasy 15.
Yes. Very much like that.
I mean, it's the same people.
Yeah, let's hope it doesn't end the same way.
I don't want to be in a hallway. I still haven't finished 15 because I'm just enjoying the open world as much as I can, and I don't want to go back to I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to a hallway and fight a game in a tightly compact area. But the story I liked. It was a really cool world and environment. But we'll see with Kingdom Hearts 4. I'm very curious. Not excited necessarily because of how 3 left a taste in my mouth, but we'll see. In other and final little bit of news, we do have a new Monkey Island game. I believe it's getting remade onto new modern consoles now. This one is going to be really big news. Miles, you are a resident Monkey Island expert. Would you like to explain to the people a little bit more about what this kind of means?
So, on April Fool's Day, Ron Gilbert announced that he was making a new Monkey Island game, and everyone thought, "Oh, okay, yeah, whatever, Ron. It's April Fool's. We're not gonna bite." A couple days later, it was revealed to actually be real, with a real trailer for Return to Monkey Island. It's going to be much like the first 2 Monkey Island titles. Ron Gilbert is returning. Dave Grossman is back to co-write. Composers Michael Land, Peter McDonald, and Clint Bajalkin are writing the music again. So a lot of the original team is back.
Yes.
It's another modern point-and-click adventure game. Ron Gilbert has already done a couple of these in the past. Was it him that did... there was one that was done sort of in the same style and with a couple of LucasArts alumni. Thimbleweed Park, which I think I talked about when we were talking about adventure games.
Yes.
And so if the new Monkey Island is going to be anything like that, but with Monkey Island coat of paint on it, I am very happy. These adventure games still manage to be top notch. They bring back a lot of the old charm and a lot of new polish.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. We heard at the last meeting for the maid, we actually heard someone like confirm the announcement, and one of them was a friends of Ron Gilbert, and then he was saying, yeah, he has been keeping that from me for about like 4 years, 5 years. And then he said 12 years ago he was going to announce another game on April Fool's Day, and he did it. And no fooling, it's coming out. So
he says this
keep
was
an
a
eye
joke
out for that.
18 years in the making.
Yes, it's going to be. I'm excited to check it out and get my hands in that world. But I think that's about all the time we have for the news of today, and then we're going to throw it over to a little bit of a history lesson about Dragon's Lair. So get your ears ready, get your swords ready, get those quick time event muscles ready to roll, and let's go through this Laserdisc adventure. So let's talk about Dragon's Lair.
And here we are to talk about Dragon's Lair, which is a bit of an interesting game. So where to start with this thing? What do you know about it?
Well, it was like it was one of the first games that was done like hand-drawn cells. It was also an expensive arcade game, one of the first ones to require 2 quarters instead of 1. So it was an expensive game. Don Bluth, who was an old Disney animator, he did all of the cells for it, him and his company. It's also notoriously a very, very hard game.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of pioneering a lot of quick time events that were just parts of games that we see now. The entire game is basically a quick time event.
So the concept for it began with Rick Dyer, president of Advanced Microcomputer Systems, which I believe doesn't exist anymore. And he was inspired by a text game called Adventure. And so it sort of evolved into this device, I guess you would call it, called the Fantasy Machine, which started off sort of as a rudimentary computer with tape, like actual paper tape in it that printed out basically what was happening, to a video disc system with images and narration and voiceover and such. And it played a game called The Secret of the Lost Woods, which never got any traction. I think there's sort of an apocryphal story about a producer who was being pitched the idea and just walked out of the meeting halfway through.
Yep.
So
he's like, I'm good.
But eventually, Dyer got in touch with Don Bluth after watching The Secret of Nim, which is a movie that was directed by Don Bluth, who is a veteran Disney animator. He's done a whole bunch of movies. You've probably watched at least something of his.
The Secret of Nim. I mean, he did Rescue Rangers and a couple other things like that.
Shoot, did he do the original Land Before Time? I think he did
that. Yeah. I mean, I believe so, but continue.
Don Bluth is a interesting person. Check him out. You've definitely heard of something he's done. But so Dyer got Don Bluth's studio to do the animation for the game. And so that sort of evolved into the final concept for Dragon's Lair. It was a full motion video game, so it was basically just linear animated segments, entirely QTE based. So it would basically just swap between success or failure, pre-rendered cutscenes, hand-drawn sequences. A single run with no deaths would last about 12 minutes. There were 22 total minutes of footage, which is about 50,000 frames of animation. So,
and I think there was something like 50 or 20. Like, I feel like half of them was just death sequences.
A lot of different ways to die.
Of Dirk melting and turning into a skeleton, getting set on fire, falling into lava, falling into an endless pit. Any imaginable death.
So the basic plot was a sort of goof knight named Dirk. I can't remember.
The Daring.
Dirk the Daring had to go into a castle to rescue the fair maiden Daphne. The whole game had a $3 million budget, which, while seeming to be expensive back then, was kind of small for today. But they had no models for characters. They had no professional voice actors. They had to sort of use cutouts from various magazines to use as reference for characters. The only professional voice actor they had was Michael Rye, who narrated the attract sequence. So, like, what plays before the actual game starts, which is, like, hey, this is the game. This is what it does. Here's a bunch of vignettes. Your quest awaits. Come play. Mm-hmm. That whole segment was recorded in a single 18-hour session, which sounds honestly nightmarish.
Yeah. Just an entire full day of just sitting in a booth, like just talking into a microphone and getting every little sequence done right and notes on every little thing.
Along that same line, the music and sound effects were scored and performed by Chris Stone. Everything was done basically with a synthesizer or with a sort of an emulator.
Mm-hmm. All of the music and stuff for it was very much like kind of like cutting edge for the time too. The I forget exactly which synthesizer was used, but it was very classic 1980s adventure with like synth strings, a little bit of keyboards, some horns, and a couple of compressed drum lines. It was very, very, very exciting, very festive, and very fun.
Mm-hmm.
But for all of this to be captured on a new arcade system, this was like one of the first games this is one of the first games that was inspired by that used Laserdisc as its initial thing. It was inspired by the game Astron Belt by Sega, which also used a Laserdisc to do like much higher quality graphics of everything that you were able to see. So essentially, imagine being in an arcade in 1983. You're seeing games like Pole Position, Pac-Man, Spy Hunter, just huge names in games like Track and Field, but 8-bit, and they're still fun to play. And then this fully like animated movie looking video game comes into the system, and you're able to actually check out essentially movie quality graphics, kind of like we're seeing in a lot of today's video games, just as a blanket. But it was one of the most standout games, like in the arcades. Lines just like stood up around it. It was so popular to a point where people hooked up a second monitor on top of the cabinet so the audience could watch the movement and check it out.
Like hours long queue times. It was an extremely popular sensation.
Extremely popular and expensive. I mean, it had all this new technology. It had like a large budget. It was groundbreaking for the time. But it used the Laserdisc format, which was a precursor to like CDs, the compact discs. But the way it does is it, like for movies, it would read along the Laserdisc like in a linear fashion for going to like the next location and everything else. But for the game, it was kind of like scanning multiple different areas of the disc back and forth, which caused a lot of extra strain. They were not like cheap Laserdisc systems either for each cabinet. They were relatively high quality for the time, but with the extended like play use of just hours and hours a day of play and being left on, it caused undue strain on a lot of the systems. and like the laser itself would break after about 650 hours of like total play and being left on. Later versions of the cabinet eventually used like a solid state laser, which helped make it last thousands of hours longer. But it was absolutely incredible to see. I have yet to see an actual cabinet of it in real life. That is one of the things that I would love to potentially get into the museum at some point, is a full cabinet of Dragon's Lair. I mean, and the reception of it, I mean, it did come out at a pretty unfortunate time too. It released like right in the middle, right before the start of the video game crash. Helped save it like a little bit, but it was already on such a decline at that point in time. I mean, the saturation of different games that were available to play, and then a lot of like games just being released and essentially being like advertisements, like on the NES. These games were costing like $50-$60 back in the day. And then you find out it's just an ad for like Ovaltine or something. So people were kind of over the video games and like just the oversaturation of the market and the lack of new innovations. But later on in 1985, we started to see like, I mean, in 1983, when Dragon's Lair was released, it definitely saw like a bump up in people going to check this game out, even though it was also the first game to cost 50 cents a play, and plays would last like maybe 30 seconds. So it was like King Quarter Eater.
I mean, I think part of the reason it had to be so expensive was that the cabinet was just that much more expensive to maintain. If it broke constantly,
yeah,
and you had to buy a new Laserdisc reader, you had to somehow make your money back.
One to play, one for maintenance. But if you haven't taken a look at this game, this is the layout of the castle that you're going through is quite the headache. I mean, you're just exploring this. You're exploring this castle, basically hopping over a castle that's falling apart, floors falling out from underneath you. There's a volcano within the castle at some point because there's lots of lava. Wherever this castle was made seems like a great construction decision. It's quite the incredible segment of game. And especially, I mean, one of the big things about it is like they didn't really give Dirk any voice lines or anything. He has like one line close to the end of the game, and I think it's wow. When he finally gets into the main layer where the princess is being held. But they made it just like a series of grunts so that it would translate for like overseas and everybody else. They didn't need to have like an English soundtrack necessarily. It could just be movements and grunts of different people, so you can kind of put yourself in their shoes. You didn't need to understand what they were saying. You just felt it viscerally. This game is groundbreaking for many, many other reasons. I mean, some of the maintenance, yeah, I think, wasn't there like a complaint about a lot of the maintenance people not like all the maintenance people at all these arcades were just having to spend so much time like fixing it and replacing the Laserdisc system. It would run for a few days and then something in the Laserdisc system would break. It would be off. And those are, I mean, a new Laserdisc back then would even cost like $600-$700. So to put a new system in, you could almost potentially buy a new cabinet of another game for that price.
Yeah.
So was it worth it to have for the draw? Potentially. But I think it eventually paid off for all of them.
Yeah.
As far as like where the legacy that this is left as well, Dragon's Lair has been ported to many systems over the years. I mean, it was ported to like the Coleco Atom. It was ported to the NES. It was ported to the Sega. It was ported to a lot of different ones.
ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Amiga, DOS, Atari, Apple II, Game Boy, SNES.
It's still being released on it's still being released on systems now as like a package of like the trilogy of games that you can play.
GameCube, PS3, 360, Wii, iPad. Like if it's got a screen, this game has come out on it.
So you're saying I can play Dragon's Lair on my recorder, on my Zoom recorder with the pixel screen? At least the NES port, where it's the original NES port ended up just being a side scroller because they're like, how are we gonna do the graphics on the NES? The graphics do look good, but it's very slow movement, laggy inputs. It notoriously one of the harder games that you could ever check out, to the point where every movement that you do, everything kills you in one hit too, even on the NES system, except for these like other enemies that have you a health bar and then will take down just a little bit of your health while everything else kills you in one hit. It's like, why do I have a health bar if I just die in one hit?
Going beyond the game, there was a show based on it that aired in 1983 and 1984. It didn't last very long. It was only a single season. But it was kind of the same basic concept of like, here's Dirk going into the castle. And then the sort of interesting idea for that was that between commercial breaks, at the start of a commercial break, the narrator would come on and say, what would you have Dirk do? And then after the commercial break, you'd sort of pick back up and like see where you left off. So again, it's not like super inventive there, but it's a kind of way to bring the like QTE choice-based gameplay into a more linear medium. It's not perfect, but I thought that was kind of a cool note. Like they at least
it was a precursor to Dora the Explorer.
Right.
Yeah. Choose your own adventure. You can absolutely choose your own adventure with this game.
Most of the adventures are wrong, and you die.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
At least you can do that.
At least you have the choice. At least you have choices. This game has seen many iterations of other things going on before as well. Most recently, there have been talks about a movie version of this, which with Don Bloop's animation company, they did a like Indiegogo or crowdfunding campaign. I believe they got, I think it's like either $700,000 or like $7 or a couple $1 million to make this movie. They apparently they were in talks with Netflix for negotiations back in 2020, and there was discussions about having Ryan Reynolds be Dirk the Daring. So we will see whether the production continues or not. IMDb says to expect a release sometime this year. So keep your ears and eyes open if you'd like to see a little bit of video game history acted out once again by Ryan Reynolds.
Well, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yes, as everything. I mean, but hey, you now see Monkey Island, a return to Monkey Island. So
yeah,
there is still hope. There is still hope.
Does the maid have a copy of the game? Like not the cabinet, but like do we have it on Laserdisc?
I don't believe we do, but that would be one of the...
That would be a get.
Yeah, that would be one of the crowning things to display in the museum. If you know anybody who's like looking to preserve one or donate, at least have it on display at the museum, send us an email to info@themaid.org. That would we're always looking for donations and anything that could help be preserved and displayed at the museum. But yet again, we're gonna have, I think that's a little bit about all that we have for Dragon's Lair at the moment. But Dragon's Lair is like a groundbreaking game. definitely check out a playthrough of it if you want. You can find playthroughs on YouTube. You can check them out in many other different locations. But it's worth giving a watch. It's not very long. I think the full thing is like 12 minutes or so for the entire playthrough from start to finish if you don't die. Very fast paced, very eye catching, addicting to say the least about all this game. And also, you were right about Don Bluth creating Land Before Time.
I knew it.
Yes. So if you're aware, like Don Bluth animation style is one of the best in the game. It's still hand-drawn cells. It's amazing, amazing hand-drawn animation. And Dragon's Lair was pioneering in a thing when you were having a little 8-bit yellow circle munching on some white little pixels. And then you go see a fully animated knight fighting dragons and jumping over chasms and dodging a fire-breathing dragon to save a beautiful princess.
Yeah, nothing really compared.
It was a very unique standout. I mean, even with Astron Belt, which was also Laserdisc, it was still more like pixelated art design. It was very like 2D linear, but it was still not quite as like fully fleshed out and animated like each of these cells were. It's also interesting just to think about having a game like this just randomize each encounter each different time. It's very much nowadays it would kind of be like a play along movie, but it's leaves more to be desired. For today's interactivity on games, then it was definitely pioneering for its time, but we have evolved in many different ways since then. But I think that's about it for the history of Dragon's Lair. Let us know if you have any more info, and we'll talk about wrapping this up. I hope everybody enjoyed the little bit of fun facts about Dragon's Lair and some of the history involved with that beautiful cell animated game. It's still a really cool story, and it's still hard as heck and fun to play. But and hey,
it looks pretty.
It looks really cool.
It was groundbreaking at its time. I don't think it's a fun game.
It's very hard. It's very hard. You need ridiculous reaction time in order to take care of this game. But I digress. It still left its mark, especially at the time. But before we close out this episode, has anybody been playing anything fun? It's like I've been playing Elden Ring. I wouldn't necessarily classify it as fun. It's cathartic.
I started playing Deep Rock Galactic with my friends again. A new season has started. They've got a battle pass and a bunch of new content. So it's shaping up to be fun again.
To be fun again.
Well, so Deep Rock Galactic is kind of like Left 4 Dead. It's like those style of games where it's basically you get dropped into a location, you have an objective. There are hordes of enemies who come to fight you while you try and do your thing. It's fun. There's a lot of traversal mechanics. There's a lot of fun that you can have with communicating with players and gathering all the materials you can, because you're dwarven miners. You're mining in space basically. And the only issue with that formula is that the enemy variety doesn't change very much. There's not really there are 4 or 5 boss encounters and you just cycle through them. But the new content patch, the new season, added a bunch of sort of new styles of enemies and new mission types. So there's a lot more variety you can have with it now.
I do want to check that game out. I was also turned on to really check out Outer Wilds. So I think that's the next little space adventure that I'm going to be indulging on as well. That game does. Sorry, what was the Black Rock? No, not Black Rock.
Deep Rock Galactic.
Deep Rock. Do they have a rock themed soundtrack as well?
Oh, the soundtrack is actually really good. It's not Doom. It's not the new Doom soundtracks, but it gives me sort of the same energy of like, this is like, the composer did not need to go as hard as he did.
Okay.
Like it is good music.
Every time they don't need to go as hard as they did is mentioned, it's generally a good idea.
Yeah. No, when all the bug aliens are swarming you, the soundtrack is going hard. It's great.
Alrighty. Might have to check that out with you and hop on in a little bit too. Yeah, no news from me. 7 hours trying to beat Radon and finally did it in Elden Ring. So it was very satisfying, but hard. This game is hard.
I mean, it's a Souls game, so
yep.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be that.
Yes, still hard. But I think that's all good. Anthony, have you been playing anything new recently?
Just been tackling Celeste, doing a couple stages here and there.
Oh man, I cannot.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm liking the narrative of Celeste. It's I still haven't quite uncovered exactly what it is, but I can tell that it's a very personal sort of story involving kind of like the humanness of people and how our negative sort of traits can affect us, I feel is what the overall theme of the game is, but I'm still just kind of going into it blind.
Well, that's good. I feel like you'll have a great time finishing that game. It's a beautiful story and it's just a beautiful game. It'll be very exciting. I'm waiting to hear your final thoughts about once you actually get to the end and see what you think.
Yeah, it should be fun. It's very fun, very cute. I love pixel art, so that's just really amazing game.
Mm-hmm.
I love that art style. I wish more games would do more like 16-bit pixel style thematics. We have the capability to make a lot of really amazing games with that style now. You're not limited to a 64 pack of colors. It's going to be a very cool thing. But I think that might be all the time we have for this episode. So we want to thank you very much for listening to the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment's official podcast. If you have any thoughts, questions, corrections, or general museum ideas, please shoot us an email at info@themade.org.
We'd like to send out a big thank you to everyone who donated recently and to our Patreon supporters who keep the Made afloat. Patreon donors get to listen to this podcast 1 week before it's released on major streaming services, and we continue that with future episodes every week.
This week's episode was brought to you in part by Patreon donors Daniel J. Heenan and James Gray. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time, I'm Miles.
I'm Red.
I'm Chin.
And I'm Anthony. Thanks. We'll see you next week.